Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to the Violet Temple. We're talking all things wellness, and I feel like this is one mental and emotional wellness piece, something that really bothered me today, and I'd like to talk it over with you and ask you a question and kind of see what we can do about it. So I was ending my day at my job, and usually at the end of the day, one of my coworkers will come sit down at my desk, and we might talk shop for a little bit, decompress or whatever. But today she said something to me, and this is a very trusted, very loyal, somebody that I wouldn't think would be privy to gossip, but it just goes to show that gossip can be a vice that 111, as I'm saying this, gossip can be a vice that any of us can be victim to. It's super easy to fall into it. Sometimes it's hard to even tell what gossip is. And so when I'm referring to gossip, it's just anything negative that you're saying about somebody else. And so she kind of made a passive aggressive comment to me that basically said, our two other coworkers that called out sick today, well, that just seems awfully convenient because it's Monday and they had a long weekend. And I can think of a lot of times in my own personal life experience where I've had to call out on a Monday, where it looked awfully convenient, but I really was sick, came down with it over the weekend, tried to heal, and just was not well enough. So just because somebody calls out on a Monday does not necessarily mean that they're not sick. So I told her, and I said, I told her that same story about me, 2, 3, 4, as I said that. I told her that same story about me, and I said, whether it's true or whether it's not true actually doesn't matter in this case, because what I'm going to be doing is giving my coworkers the benefit of the doubt, because the last thing I want is an instance where, okay, let's say I call out sick, and is that okay for all my coworkers to be talking smack about me while I'm sick and be like, well, I bet she just wanted a long weekend. So I know that I wouldn't be okay if somebody was saying that about me. And so that's the measure that I use. I wouldn't want somebody talking negatively about me. And if you're one of those people and you're saying those things and you're like, well, I don't really care what people say. Even if you don't care what people say, maybe that other person's feelings would be hurt. And we can all have thick skins, and I think thick skins are important. I could get really mad at my coworker for saying those things to me, but I think she's getting caught up in things going on in our job and is obviously being privy to gossip. And she said that she was going to tell me some things that are being said, but then decided against it. And I said, exactly. I said, because if somebody was saying something about you, I said, I wouldn't stand for it. And it really takes all of us in order to decide that that's not okay. And we have to be willing to stand up for the other person. So where this brings you all in, 444, is I want you to think about in your own, maybe it's work, maybe it's volunteering, maybe it's family. I want you to think about how you show up in those spaces and show up for those people, and whether or not, and I guess I want to how do you show up for those people, but also how do you show up for them when they're not around? Are you going to be changing your tune if they're in or out of those spaces? If they suddenly don't show up, what are you going to be saying? Is it the same thing that you would say to their face? And I would go so far as to say, if you're not saying the same thing to their face as you do in private, then it's probably gossip. And the question comes in where I hear people all the time complaining about politicians or this person or that person. And I think it really all boils down to the same thing. And that is, it's not up to some politician. It's not up to some other person to create a better world. It's up to us. And the only way to do that is by person to person and creating that ripple effect. So if you're sitting there and you're like, gee, it'd be nice to have a world where everybody was caring and, everybody did this. It doesn't just come by happenstance. Jesus gave us the greatest gift on the planet by absolving us of our sins, and we still, thousands of years later, still have trouble loving our neighbor. So that's what we need to focus on. So it's not up to some distant person. It's up to us. And creating a better world is not some random gift that somebody's just going to drop off on our door one day and say, wow, here's a better world. It takes time. It takes real people and real situations to develop that. Just, parents know that very well. When you're trying to get your kids to stop doing a habit, or maybe you've quit a habit. So a lot of these are mental thought processes. That's why I said this is a mental and emotional, because they're mental thought processes that cause an emotional reaction. So the first thing is, what are we saying to ourselves in our own head? What does that voice sound like? Because if it's judgmental and critical, I guarantee you it's doing the same thing to other people, because it's just a mental habit. And then, are we catching ourselves when we're talking to other people? Are we stopping ourselves before we say something negative, regardless of whether it's true or not? That's the thing. Because in that instance with my coworker, it didn't really matter if they were lying to get out sick. The whole point in my eyes was, we get paid time off for holidays and for sick time. I'm very fortunate that I work for a job that allows that. And we cover other people that are out of the office regardless. So I didn't always work for jobs where that was the case. So in my eyes, I'm like, we get that luxury. That is a luxury. We get that luxury. So if somebody wants to use that time, regardless of how they want to use it, I need to have their back, and I would expect them to do the same for me. But the problem is then when we start being really judgy and critical about how somebody's using that time, and then who are we to say what they should and shouldn't be using it for? I get that everybody wants to be treated the same, because in an ideal world, everybody should be sharing the exact same load, right? We all have a part to play in this earth and this planet. Everybody should be, putting in the same load. But the reality is, I want you to think about it. The reality is not everybody can carry the same load. For instance, if we're just talking physical weight, most of the time men can carry a heavier load than women. And they can carry a heavier load than somebody that's disabled and doesn't have any legs. So are we expecting that person that doesn't have legs to carry the same load? So just think about that. I think the point is, we're doing the best that we can. Are we always making the best choices? No. But I guarantee you, if you're judging somebody on how they made those choices, then you better stop right there, because I guarantee you, you've made some tough calls and you've made some choices that maybe you're not proud of. So if you're judging somebody else, what about you? So I really feel like if one of the best things that we can do if we're trying to create a better world is just simply treat people with kindness, with the benefit of the doubt. Don't be stupid, but, do have healthy boundaries, yes. Don't be, ignorant, but use discernment. And, maybe those coworkers are not sick. And if they're not sick, well, it doesn't really change the fact that I still have to cover them anyway. And then if they keep doing that, they're going to run themselves out of a job, and we'll get somebody else, and maybe somebody else will fill the position better. So either way, it's out of my control. It's out of my hands. So I'm not really going to waste my time talking bad about somebody else. So I just want you to think about that for a minute. Think about how you're showing up in your personal places, who you're being, who you're talking about, why you're talking about them, 1222, and how you're talking about yourself. How are you showing up for yourself? I think that's really important. And I hope you choose your words wisely, because they're precious and they have a lot of power. And I just want to say, love ya. I hope you're having a good day. Hope this makes it better. Don't worry about the small stuff. It doesn't really matter anyway. So, bye. Until next time. Thanks for listening.